The story of Anne Boleyn does not begin on a scaffold at the Tower of London. It begins in whispers, in ambition, in the glittering yet treacherous corridors of the Tudor court. Born around 1501 into a rising but not royal family, Anne was not destined for a crown. She spent her youth in the courts of the Netherlands and France, learning grace, wit, and the polished manners that set her apart when she returned to England. When she entered the service of Queen Catherine of Aragon, Henry VIII's long-suffering wife, few could have imagined that this dark-haired, sharp-tongued lady-in-waiting would set a kingdom on fire. At first, Anne was simply another court beauty, but she was different. She refused to play the role expected of her, the compliant mistress, the silent ornament to a king's desires. Henry's passion for her was as immediate as it was dangerous. For years he had strayed from Catherine, but Anne would not yield. She held out, insisting she would not be another of his conquests. If he wanted her, he must make her his wife. That demand struck like a thunderclap. To marry Anne, Henry would have to cast aside Catherine of Aragon, his queen of 2 decades, aunt of the powerful Holy Roman Emperor. Divorce was forbidden by the Church. Yet Henry was not a man to accept denial. His obsession with Anne became a crusade. Thus began the king's great matter. For years, Henry pleaded with the Pope to annul his marriage. Rome refused. Catherine fought fiercely for her crown, backed by her powerful kin. But Henry, urged on by Anne's ambition and his own hunger for a male heir, broke with Rome itself. He declared himself head of the Church of England, seizing powers no English king had ever claimed. Monasteries trembled. Priests fled. Centuries of tradition were overturned, all for the love of one woman. And in 1533, Anne was crowned queen. But the coronation was no fairy tale. The streets of London were lined not only with banners, but with muttering crowds. Many still loved Catherine. Many despised Anne, blaming her for the king's betrayal of his faithful wife and of the Catholic faith. To them, she was the concubine, the whore. Whispers said she had bewitched Henry, ensnaring him with sorcery. Her dark eyes, sharp wit, and defiant pride only deepened suspicion. Yet for a time, Anne seemed untouchable. She shone in court, commanding attention with intelligence as much as beauty. Unlike Catherine, she did not meekly defer to Henry. She argued, laughed, charmed, and defied. Foreign ambassadors reported her boldness with astonishment. She was not a queen of passive grace. She was a queen of fire. But fire can burn too brightly. Anne's power was tied to one promise. She would give Henry the son he craved. Catherine had borne him only a daughter, Mary, and Henry's dynasty, the fragile Tudor line, teetered without a male heir. Anne's triumph depended on her womb. In 1533, she gave birth to her first child, a girl, Elizabeth. Henry was disappointed, though he concealed it with forced cheer. Surely, he told himself, a son would follow. But the following years brought only miscarriages, false hopes, and Henry's growing bitterness. Each failure widened the rift between king and queen. Each disappointment sharpened the knives of Anne's enemies at court, and enemies she had in abundance. The old nobility despised her family's rise. Cromwell, Henry's chief minister, grew wary of her influence. Even the common people muttered that England's ills, the break with Rome, the seizure of church lands, the unrest, were the curse of Anne Boleyn. Still, Anne did not bend. She quarreled openly with Henry, daring to speak where others bowed. She mocked his mistresses, challenged his policies, and reminded him, dangerously, that she had helped him seize his throne from the Pope. Henry, once besotted, began to see not a lover, but a threat. By 1536, the court was a battlefield. Catherine of Aragon was dead, but instead of freeing Anne, her death made her position more precarious. Without Catherine, Henry could remarry without fear of papal interference. Without Catherine, there was no obstacle to Anne's replacement. That year, Anne miscarried again, this time of a male child. For Henry, it was the final straw. The woman for whom he had torn apart Christendom had failed him. Whispers of betrayal swirled. She was faithless, unchaste, perhaps even a traitor. Anne's brilliance, her wit, her defiance, all the qualities that had raised her to a throne now sharpened the blades against her. Where once Henry had called her his most beloved, he now called her goggle-eyed whore. Where once she was his salvation, she was now his scapegoat. And so the queen who had defied a kingdom found herself surrounded by enemies, her crown slipping, her very life in peril. The spring of 1536 crept into London, not with blossoms and renewal, but with whispers. Whispers that wound their way through the corridors of the royal palaces, through taverns and marketplaces, until they swirled like smoke around the queen herself. Anne Boleyn had survived for 3 years on a knife's edge, balancing power and peril with defiance. But by April, the knives were no longer hidden. They were sharpening in plain sight. The spark came from Thomas Cromwell, Henry's chief minister. Once an ally of Anne, Cromwell had grown wary of her meddling in affairs of state. Anne was not content to be a silent queen. She argued policy, opposed Cromwell's schemes to seize wealth from the church, and openly quarreled with him in front of the king. Worse, she mocked him, calling him a low-born upstart who enriched himself at England's expense. Cromwell, calculating and ruthless, decided her time was over. And Cromwell did not plot without the king's consent. Henry VIII himself was ready to be rid of her. Once he had called her the only one I love, but now he could barely look at her. The miscarried son in January had broken his faith in her, and his roving eyes had already fallen upon Jane Seymour. Meek, pliant, everything Anne was not. In Jane, Henry saw the promise of peace, obedience, and perhaps a longed-for son. But to rid himself of Anne, Henry needed more than coldness. He needed justification. A king could not simply discard a queen he had torn a church apart to marry. He required a story dark enough to blacken her name, strong enough to silence her supporters, final enough to make her removal unquestionable. Cromwell supplied it. The accusations were shocking: adultery, incest, treason. According to the charges whispered into Henry's ear, Anne had taken not one but several lovers among his courtiers. She had seduced young men of the king's privy chamber. She had betrayed her marriage bed, dishonored her crown, endangered the royal succession. Most monstrous of all, she was said to have committed incest with her own brother, George Boleyn. The charges were absurd. No one could produce proof beyond gossip and tortured confessions. But in Tudor England, truth mattered less than the story the king wanted to believe. On May 2nd, 1536, Anne was arrested. She was dining at Greenwich Palace when the guards came. The Queen was escorted across the river by barge to the Tower of London. the same tower where she had celebrated her coronation 3 years earlier in triumph. Now the fortress loomed as a tomb. Witnesses said she seemed calm, even defiant, though her composure cracked when she entered the tower gates. "Is this where I am to die?" she whispered. Yet within moments she rallied. She swore her innocence, declaring that if it were the king's pleasure to kill her, she would obey God's will. In the tower, Anne's world collapsed piece by piece. Her brother George was dragged in, accused alongside her. Courtiers she had once smiled upon, Henry Norris, William Brereton, Francis Weston, Mark Smeaton, were named as her supposed lovers. Smeaton, a young musician, was the only one who confessed, likely under torture. His words, twisted and exaggerated, sealed the fate of them all. The king himself would not see her. Henry, once intoxicated with her laughter, now paraded with Jane Seymour at his side, making no effort to hide his betrayal. He left Anne to rot in her chambers, awaiting judgment. Yet even here, Anne remained herself, sharp, fiery, unyielding. She laughed bitterly with her ladies, saying she would be remembered as the great whore of England. She wept, then prayed, then railed against the injustice. Her mood shifted like storm clouds, but through them all ran a thread of steel. She would not confess to crime she had not committed. The betrayal cut deepest, not from Henry, nor even Cromwell, but from her own kin. Her uncle, the Duke of Norfolk, presided over her trial. Her father, Thomas Boleyn, did nothing to save her, preferring to salvage his own position. George, her brother, was condemned beside her, accused of unspeakable sins. By mid-May, the net had closed. The trials were formalities, the verdicts predetermined. Anne was guilty. Her alleged lovers were guilty. George Boleyn was guilty. All were sentenced to die. For Anne, the betrayal was complete. Her husband had abandoned her. Her allies had turned against her. Her family had been broken. Even God seemed silent. But she was not yet finished. In the days that remained, she would fight not with armies or policy, but with her words, her bearing, her final defiance in the face of death. And so in the shadows of the tower, the queen prepared for a trial that was never meant to grant justice, only spectacle. The axe or the sword waited. But first would come humiliation, the ritual destruction of her name. The Tower of London had always been a place of endings. Its gray stone walls had witnessed the fall of kings, nobles and rebels alike. But in May 1536, it became the stage for one of the most infamous spectacles in English history, the trial of Queen Anne Boleyn. The Great Hall of the Tower was crowded that day, with lords and courtiers summoned to pass judgment on their queen. Above them, banners of state hung heavy in the stale air. At the center sat Anne's own uncle, Thomas Howard, Duke of Norfolk, presiding as High Steward of England. His face was a mask of cold duty, but the irony was bitter. He would condemn his own niece. Anne was brought forward, clad in a simple gown of black damask, her hair hidden beneath a hood. Thin from imprisonment, pale from sleepless nights, she looked diminished in body, but not in spirit. Witnesses recorded that she carried herself with a goodly, modest manner, her dark eyes bright, her bearing calm, almost regal. The charges were read aloud: adultery, treason, incest. Each accusation thundered through the hall. a weapon meant not only to destroy Anne but to humiliate her beyond death. She was accused of seducing multiple men of the king's household: Norris, Weston, Brereton, Smeaton, and of coupling with her own brother George Boleyn. The words dripped with venom, designed to paint her not just as unfaithful, but monstrous. Anne listened in silence, hands folded, her face composed. When the accusations ended, she rose to speak. "My lords," she began, her voice steady, "I do not say that I have always borne towards the king's majesty the humility which his goodness to me, and the honor to which he raised me, merited. I admit my jealous fancies and suspicions, but may God be my witness, I have not sinned against him in any other way." Her words rippled through the hall. She did not grovel, she did not beg. Instead, she acknowledged her faults as a wife, her temper, her sharp tongue, but denied with solemn clarity the charges of treason and adultery. "As for my brother," she said firmly, "I would rather suffer death than falsely accuse him of such a thing." Even her enemies could not help but be struck by her composure. One chronicler later admitted, "She stood undismayed, showing no fear, but spoke with as much boldness and courage as ever." But Anne's eloquence was meaningless. The verdict had been written before she ever stepped into the hall. The jurors, men who owed their lives and fortunes to Henry, had no choice but to condemn. George Boleyn, tried separately, had mounted his own brilliant defense, mocking the absurdity of the charges, but his wit sealed nothing except his fate. When the foreman rose to declare Anne guilty, the words fell like a death knell. She was sentenced to be burned at the stake or beheaded at the king's pleasure. The cruelty of the double sentence hung in the air, a reminder that her life now rested entirely in Henry's hands. For a moment, Anne wavered. The mask of composure cracked, and she swore her innocence once more, lifting her eyes heavenward. "I am clear from the fact of which I am accused," she cried, "and never offended the king with my body." Tears shone in her eyes, but her voice did not falter. "I pray God save him, and send him long to reign over you." Her uncle Norfolk delivered the final words with chilling detachment. "Because you have offended our sovereign, the king's grace, the law of the realm is that you be burnt here within the Tower of London, on the green, or else to have your head smitten off as the king's pleasure shall be further known." Anne was led away. The lords filed out, muttering, some shaken, some satisfied. The queen, who had defied Rome, who had risen higher than any woman before her, was now condemned as a criminal fit for the axe or the fire. In her chambers, Anne wept. She prayed. She confessed her sins to the Archbishop of Canterbury, but never adultery, never treason. To her ladies, she said with grim humor that she would be remembered as Queen Anne sans tête, Queen Anne without a head. Even facing death, her sharp wit flickered. Then came the king's decision. Henry, in what he deemed mercy, decreed she should not burn. Instead, he summoned an expert swordsman from Calais, famed for his swift, clean strokes. It was presented as kindness, a death less brutal than the clumsy axe. But for Anne, the thought of a foreign executioner, specially summoned to dispatch her, was hardly comfort. It was theater. It was spectacle. It was Henry's way of proving that even in mercy, he controlled every detail of her destruction. Word spread quickly through London. The Queen would die. On Tower Green, a scaffold was being built. Crowds buzzed with anticipation. For the people who had once cheered her coronation, her fall was a carnival. For others, it was tragedy. Anne had been tried, condemned, and sentenced in less than 3 weeks. Her rise had taken years, her destruction only days. Morning broke on May 19, 1536, with an uneasy stillness over the Tower of London. The air was crisp, the sky clear, as though the day itself refused to reflect the horror about to unfold. Word had spread quickly. The Queen would die today. From nobles in gilded halls to peasants in the city streets, all knew that Anne Boleyn's fate had been sealed. At Tower Green, a scaffold had been erected, not the rough platform of common traders, but a polished stage befitting a queen. It was draped in black cloth, stark against the spring sunshine. Soldiers kept the crowds in check. Nobles clustered close, summoned to bear witness. Anne would not die before a roaring mob at Tyburn. Her death was private by design, though private in Tudor England still meant hundreds of eyes. Inside her chamber, Anne dressed carefully. She chose a gown of dark damask with a red kirtle beneath, the color somber yet dignified. Over her shoulders she placed a mantle of ermine, a final assertion of royalty. She refused jewels. What use was glitter at the edge of the grave? Her long dark hair was gathered up and tucked beneath a hood. Only her eyes shone, restless yet resolute. To those who attended her that morning, she seemed strangely composed, almost serene. But such composure came not from peace, it came from defiance. She had no power left but the manner of her dying, and she meant to die well. Shortly before 9 o'clock, the lieutenant of the tower came to escort her. She thanked him graciously, saying she was ready. As she stepped into the courtyard, the sunlight fell across her face. She blinked, then lifted her chin. Whatever fear she felt, she buried it deep. The crowd hushed as she mounted the scaffold, every eye fixed on her. The woman who had unseated a queen, who had defied Rome, who had promised England sons and delivered only a daughter. Some expected her to rage against Henry, to curse her enemies, to proclaim her innocence until the end. But Anne understood spectacle. She knew her words would echo long after her body fell. She looked out over the crowd, then spoke. "Good Christian people, I am come hither to die. For according to the law and by the law I am judged to die, and therefore I will speak nothing against it. I am come hither to accuse no man, nor to speak anything of that whereof I am accused and condemned to die. But I pray God save the king and send him long to reign over you, for a gentler nor a more merciful prince was there never." Her words startled many. To praise Henry, the husband who had betrayed her, condemned her, discarded her, seemed unthinkable. But Anne knew the danger of defiance. To protest her innocence openly might have imperiled her daughter Elizabeth. To lash out at Henry would only blacken her memory. So she spoke with grace, cloaking her bitterness in piety, her rage in humility. She ended simply, "If any person will meddle of my cause, I require them to judge the best." When she finished, she knelt upon the straw, removing her mantle and hood. Her ladies, trembling and weeping, stepped forward to cover her eyes with a blindfold. They held her long hair back, their sobs breaking the silence. One witness said the sight was so pitiful that even hardened courtiers turned away, their stomachs twisting with dread. The executioner, brought from Calais at Henry's request, stood ready. Unlike the clumsy English axeman, he wielded a sword, famed for its swiftness. He approached quietly, murmuring in French to his assistants. Anne, blindfolded, could not see his movements. She knelt upright, her hands folded in prayer, whispering again and again, "To Jesus Christ I commend my soul." The executioner called for his sword. One of his men fetched it, but not directly. Instead, he distracted Anne by calling for it to be handed across the platform, behind her. Instinctively, she turned her head as though listening. At that moment, the blade flashed. In a single stroke, the sword severed her head. The crowd gasped, some crying out, others stunned into silence. Her body collapsed to the ground, blood soaking the straw. Her head, still veiled, rolled a short distance before a lady gathered it in her arms. No cheer rose, no jeers, only a heavy silence, broken by muffled sobs and the distant caw of a raven overhead. Her ladies moved quickly, working with desperate reverence. They placed her body and head into a rough arrow chest, the only coffin available, and carried it away to be buried in the chapel of St. Peter ad Vincula within the tower. No grand tomb, no marble effigy, just a hurried burial for a queen who had once worn a crown of gold. By noon, Tower Green was cleared, the scaffold silent, as though nothing had happened. Yet everyone who had stood there carried away the memory, the calm dignity of a condemned woman, the swift flash of steel, the chill in the morning air. Anne Boleyn's body lay in the chapel of St. Peter ad Vincula, hastily buried in an unmarked grave beneath the cold stones of the tower. No trumpets sounded. No dirges were sung. She had been Queen of England, crowned with golden pomp. But in death she was granted only a wooden chest and hurried prayers. Henry VIII had erased her as swiftly as he had elevated her. Yet history has never allowed Anne Boleyn to be erased. The days after her execution moved with brutal efficiency. Henry, never a man to linger in mourning, was betrothed to Jane Seymour within 24 hours. 10 days later, he married her. To the king, Anne was nothing but a shadow, needs, a scandal to be forgotten, a name to be whispered only as warning. But for those who had seen her die, her memory lingered. Witnesses could not shake the image of her composure. The queen who, abandoned by husband, family, and allies, still spoke with dignity on the scaffold. Her calm words, her whispered prayers, her final plea to judge her kindly, all became fragments of legend, carried on in hushed tones through taverns and courts alike. Even those who had despised her admitted she had met death with courage. And courage has a way of transforming monsters into martyrs. For the people of England, Anne's fall had been a spectacle of scandal. She was painted as an adulteress, a seductress, a witch who had bewitched the king. But her execution, swift and brutal, began to unravel that narrative. Could a woman so guilty, so depraved, face death with such serenity? Could a whore, as her enemies had called her, pray for her husband's long reign even as he cast her aside? The contradictions gnawed at the conscience of the nation. In time, those questions became part of her legacy. Her daughter, Elizabeth, was barely 3 years old when Anne was killed. Declared illegitimate, stripped of her title, she seemed destined for obscurity. Yet the shadow of Anne's spirit lingered in her. Elizabeth grew into a woman of intelligence, sharp wit, and unyielding will, traits so like her mother's that even her enemies remarked upon the resemblance. When Elizabeth ascended the throne in 1558, The daughter of the disgraced queen restored her mother's honor by her very existence. Under Elizabeth, England flourished. The child who had been branded a bastard became one of the greatest monarchs the world has ever known. And with every triumph of her reign, Anne's ghost rose higher, transformed from scandal into symbol. But Anne's legacy was not only written in her daughter's crown, it was etched into the very fabric of English history. Her marriage to Henry had torn England from Rome, severed centuries of papal authority, and birthed the Church of England. The Reformation had many fathers, but its spark was Anne, a queen who dared to demand not a king's embrace, but a king's crown. For that demand, she had risen. For that demand, she had died. And perhaps most enduring of all, Anne became a figure of fascination. To some, she remained the ambitious temptress who toppled a kingdom. To others, she was a martyr to tyranny, a woman destroyed by a husband's lust and betrayal. Across centuries, poets, playwrights, and historians would take up her story, reshaping her in each retelling. Villain, victim, heroine, saint. No single Anne would ever suffice. She became many Annes, each reflecting the fears and desires of the age that invoked her. But one truth endures beneath every version. Her death was no gentle passing. It was not a clean mercy, not a serene surrender. It was a terror made palatable by ritual, a horror masked by ceremony. Anne Boleyn died not in peace, but in the shadow of betrayal, humiliation, and abandonment. And yet she turned that shadow into something defiant. When the sword struck, Henry may have believed he had silenced her. But Anne's silence only roared louder through time. Every stone of the tower that had witnessed her fall seemed to remember her name. Every traveler who whispered her story carried her further into legend. Every echo of Elizabeth's reign was a vindication, a reminder that the queen they tried to erase had left behind something greater than herself. Anne's grave in the tower is marked now by a simple plaque. Visitors pause, some leaving flowers, some bowing their heads, some whispering prayers. Few linger at Jane Seymour's tomb. Few remember the other wives who followed, but Anne Boleyn endures. Because Anne's death was not peaceful. And it is precisely because it was not peaceful, because it was laced with fear, betrayal, and blood, that her story refuses to fade. Peaceful deaths are forgotten. Terrifying ones are remembered. And Anne Boleyn's end, carved in silence by a French sword on Tower Green, will be remembered forever.